He's Sean McGuire of NESN.com joining the show now. Sean, you got some studs and duds we want to talk about from the NFL Combine weekend. Let's start with the biggest name. Who jumped off the most at you that you think the guy that, did the most for himself after testing at the Combine out in Indy?
Yeah, and I kind of look at this, obviously a little bit from a Patriots perspective, so I'll kind of start there. But I just think the Iowa State receivers, so that's Jaden Higgins, that's Jalen Noel, those guys really impressed. I'll start with Higgins. His overall score ranked 4th among wideouts who participated. His athleticism score ranked 5th. And, you kind of get down to the nitty-gritty numbers, 4.47 40-yard dash. Vertical was 39 inches. Broad jump was 10 foot 8 inches. So don't want to get too bogged down in those numbers. And so to the point that we start to glaze over and everything like that. But same thing with Jalen Noel. He really 4.39 40-yard dash, vertical jump almost 42 inches, another really impressive 3-cone drill. So those guys, I think specifically, they're probably still not, day one. Certainly they're not on the board for the Patriots at number 4 overall. I'm not trying to say that, but, they look like, value when you get to the second, when you get to day 2. And, just based on the Elliott Wolf comments that we heard from last week, right before the Combine, I think it's very fair to think that the Patriots are going to be targeting those wideouts on day 2. Elliott Wolf kind of talked about the meat of the class being in the middle rounds. So I just think, day 2 with the second round, with the third round, you could see a few of those guys, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, looking like potential Patriots targets.
This is why I call George, lovingly, I call him GM George, because he's been all over this. And Elliott Wolf, I guess, is echoing kind of what George has been saying. Most Patriots fans that I talk to and I see on message boards and they put in the comments on our videos, they want Ted McMillan out of Arizona, but that's obviously a first-round grade on a receiver.
Yeah.
You bring up Jaden Higgins. Elliott Wolf talks about the meat of the wide receivers late in the draft. George talks about Jaden Higgins so much till he's blue in the face. So I'm just going to ask you here, S. Mizzle. What's the difference, in your opinion, from a Jaden Higgins in a Josh McDaniels system as opposed to a Ted McMillan? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, and just to touch on the Elliott Wolf comment, when I heard that, I first thought of Ted McMillan, just because it sounded like they aren't totally overly enthused about those early round wideouts, and I think he's the first one, right? There was a report to come out today from the Boston Herald, I believe, that said, if the Patriots trade back, that McMillan could be a potential target for that. So we'll see. Maybe they value him more at 8 or 10 than they do at 4. But I'm not exactly sure. I know the question was more related to McDaniel's offense and that sort of thing. I just think it comes back to the overall value of what you're getting in the draft. And I think the value when it comes to a Jaden Higgins, a Jalen Noel, is probably greater than, a Ted McMillan.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at Ted McMillan, the comp, I've said it since day one, for him, that's a guy that could be Drake London.
Yep.
I just don't see him reaching that ceiling, though. I don't think he does anything tremendous. And if you're going to take someone at 4, the 4th overall pick, that's like a Jamar Chase for the most recent example, or that's in a Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., guys with such higher ceilings than a Drake London who went 8 overall. But like we see in this draft, the difference between literally the top 2 prospects and the rest is night and day. If you're picking at 4, you want a guy that is going to be a blue chip player, because how it stands for the Pats right now, you look at the entire roster, who are the 2 guys you go, you know what, they're not moving, we're holding on to them, that's who you build around? Drake May, Christian Gonzalez, and it stops there. Yep. Exactly. And that's it. I loved that you point out Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Jalen Noel improved me the most. I love Jaden Higgins, 6'4", 215, really big slot, ran a 4 sub 5'40", was really good with his vertical leap as well. I think 39 inches. He tested better than Michael Pittman, but with the same build. But Jalen Noel had the highest vertical out of all receivers. He's 5'10", 195. That's Josh McDaniels written all over him. And that's a guy that has a complete route tree as well. So those are 2 guys I think were big studs. One you got to point out to, Sean, if you think about it, is Aironte Ersery. Just the fact that he ran a 5:01:40, that is the fastest time for someone that's 6'6", 330 since 2003.
Goodness.
That's a guy that could get downfield. And I think one combo to have on like both sides of it too, what Will Campbell accomplished, yes, his arm length, it's more of his wingspan. His wingspan concerns the hell out of me. And we talked about that earlier in the episode.
Yep.
But for him to reach a top speed of 20 miles per hour, just over that, that's a guy that, as a guard, can get to the second level. In any type of run blocking scheme, can get out and pull or just open up holes on the inside. Like, he's going to be such a good guard at the next level. 4th overall, I don't love it. What's about you, Sean? I know you were texting about Aironte Ersery too. You want to touch on him? What jumped out at him about you? Was it the 40-yard dash as well, or was it other testing numbers?
I think it's got to be the 40-yard dash. I mean, the stat that you just said, that's 6'6", 331 pounds, and he's running 5.01 in the 40, and he covered the first 10 yards in 1.75 seconds. I mean, that is ridiculous. Like, just imagine that sort of man coming at you, on those sorts of pulls and all that sort of stuff. It's just crazy. So I think he was. I was going to say him as well. He's got to be one of the studs that come out of today. And some things with the Will Campbell, George, I agree with you. I think the length at this point, it certainly doesn't ease any nerves. I think, if he was to come in and he was to hit that, 33 inches, and we can debate how important 3/8 of an inch is, and we will do that over the next 2 months or whatever. But the fact is, that 33-inch number is a number that league execs and scouts and everyone look at, and they that's like, it's like a threshold sort of thing. So I just think, with maybe Will Campbell, that sort of thing, causing a little bit more concern. You got someone like Ersery comes in, and you just think, wow, this kid could be a stud. If maybe we take someone earlier at 4, and then we trade back in the first round and get him at 25 or whatever the case may be, and at this point maybe he's not there. But that's I think those are all conversations we're going to have just because of how impressive he was during the combine.
All right, Esmizzle, I want to invite you to give us your duds, but before we go there, I'm trying to pick up what you're putting down here. Listen, it sounds to me, you and George are saying the same things. Will Campbell looks like he can be an elite guard in this league potentially, but I'm also hearing maybe spot starter at left tackle, not necessarily a bookend tackle. Is that what I'm getting from you definitively? And what's your gut say at number 4? Like, do you think the Patriots at number 4 will take T-Rex arms, Will Campbell, or are they going to go a different direction, trade back or go in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, so some of the things you hear kind of before the combine, Dane Brugler talked about it, Daniel Jeremiah talked about it, and they both said that, I feel comfortable with starting him at left tackle, and if something happens down the road and, he proves that the length is, it's not effective or it's a cause for concern or whatever, then you move him then. And I kind of still feel like that's a fair way to look at it. Like, I think you do draft him. Certainly it would be better to trade down to 6, trade down to 8. I know a few of the mock drafts that George and Keegan have done have included that. And I think that would be a fantastic situation. If they could do that, that would be great. Obviously you have to have a team that comes up and tries to get to 4. But yeah, I don't know how concerned I can be over 3/8 of an inch when it comes to it, because so much of the stuff on tape and so much of the stuff that you see from and you hear from, experts that are covering this stuff he can do this for at least for the time being. Like, it does not make sense to draft him as a guard. It makes sense to draft him as a tackle. And if you have to kind of change some things down the line, you change some things down the line. And the Patriots just have so many holes on the offensive line that it's kind of like, if you're going to get an all-pro at a position, you need such talent at this point that I don't think that's a bad way to go about it. So I think that answers your question, Travis. I'm certainly not like I'm caught like, tempering expectations sort of thing, maybe a little bit, but I'm not like, oh my God, you cannot draft him at 4.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. It's also, and we spoke about it earlier, and we'll also get into it later in this episode too, of the reports that are coming out from the combine too, is the Patriots are going to open up legal tampering period, swing big, and it's going to be all in on Ronnie Stanley.
Yeah.
They want to add 2 tackles, they want to add a guard, and they want to get better in the trenches. And with the top 5 pick, if you get a 10-year starter, all-pro caliber guard, and you just solidify a key part of this offensive line, and that also makes where Ronnie Stanley's 31 years old, whoever comes in at left tackle after him, if the Patriots get him, whoever comes in after him, like, you're always going to have that all-pro guy right next to you. You're going to have a Zach Martin-esque type of guard playing next to you. I think that means a lot.
Wow.
It's not the arm length
George,
because
let me just jump in on that because I was thinking the exact same thing. I remember on draft night, and you'll make fun of this, when Jerry was deciding between Johnny Manziel and Zach Martin.
I remember.
And I was disappointed at the time, and I will say that Zach Martin turned out to be an absolute lock. And so if you can get that sort of, even interior play, if you can get that sort of thing for the next 10 years, I think you got to do it. Sorry to jump in, but as soon as you said Zach Martin, my blood started flowing.
He was just going to tell you that your boy Will Campbell has T-Rex arms, and Zach Martin never had that issue. Go ahead, George. That's what he's going to tell you.
Zach Martin ended up being a guard. Let me pull up his measurables. But to that point, and that's fine, that was that was a 16th overall pick.
Right.
This is the 4th overall pick. So the trade back does make sense. Arm length for Zach Martin, 32 7/8 inches. So just right there with Will Campbell as well. But it's not the arm length, because Rashawn Slater is 33 inches on the dot, and I think he's the second best left tackle that you get in the entire league.
Yes.
But it's the wingspan, because if you're going to be undersized on the arms, you have to be long where it's tough for guys to get around you. And that's an advantage for Aironte Ersery, who has shorter arms than expected, but 6'6", that's such a big frame. 330, that's such a big frame. What worries me is Will Campbell's wingspan, and we spoke about it to open, was 77 3/8 inches. Like, you won't find any starting left tackle that has a wingspan that's short. Joe Tooney, 79-inch wingspan. Left tackle, moved to guard. Peter Skoronski, 79.5-inch wingspan. Moved to guard the second he stepped into the NFL.
Yep.
Gray Zabel, he's a left tackle at NDSU, 77.5-inch wingspan. That's what worries me. But again, if you have that guy, you have that all-pro that can mask a lot of deficiencies and helps out a team. What about for duds? Get away from the offensive line talk. Anyone, when you're thinking of weapons that, you were a guy you could see being a Patriot as you're looking at through that scope, and you were like, you know what, I want to see more from him, and he disappointed me.
Yeah, I think Tez Johnson probably is the first one
slow
to,
40.
kind of. Yeah, I mean, slow 4.5, 140, and he measured at 154 pounds. I mean, that's like that is a small human. I'm not exactly sure what Xavier Worthy is off the top of my head, but that's a small guy. And he came in, his 3-cone drill was really good. I believe it was the fastest of all the wideouts, 6.65, sorry, excuse me. But the guy comes in, comparisons of to Tank Dell sort of thing. But I think you got to be concerned with the lack of size. His frame, 154 pounds, and if he's going to run a 4.51, I just think that's gotta get him on the dud category in here.
Yeah, and that's a guy, Xavier Worthy, I think it was 175 coming.
I got it right here. He's 5'11", 165. But to S. Measy's point, he runs like the wind.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
I mean, he set the record for a 40-yard dash. Right. If you're going to be that tiny, you got to make sure they can't catch you.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're going to be able to catch him. Yeah, that jumped out at me. I was just like shocked. I had to triple take it. A dud for me was a Caleb Johnson, where, again, talking about slow 40 times, his 40 was a 4.57. Wasn't fantastic on the 10-yard split either. And for a running back that's seen as like RB3, RB4, I thought he could have helped himself out a lot this weekend. Not a natural pass catcher, not exceptionally fast, the agility isn't insane to me. It's just he doesn't do anything exceptional. So when you're looking at running backs, it's the old name, but I love Donovan Edwards, and he looked really good at the combine. I would rather wait 3 rounds and get a Donovan Edwards than I would to get a Caleb Johnson, say if I have to take him in the 3rd. So that's the one guy that you got to watch running backs for the Patriots that need to build that backfield out a little bit. Yes. And Caleb Johnson out of Iowa let me down with his combine performance.
Yeah, and I'll just keep it going. And this is a low-hanging fruit sort of thing, but I'm going to go with Gunnar Helm. And it sucks. I mean, you got to kind of feel bad for the kid. Twisted his ankle. He false started on the 40-yard dash, ended up twisting his ankle. So that's a pretty crappy way to start. And he finished the drills. So, that sort of thing. Football guys are going to love that. Finished the drills, didn't complain about it, all that sort of thing. But the numbers so obviously were impacted. What was it, like 4.84 40-yard dash, a 30-inch vertical. I mean, we're talking about a guy that I believe Dane Brugler had him as like the top 5 tight end. And, his score was at 10, today. His score was at 10 on the combine. And that's, some of the top guys didn't even perform and didn't even go out there and participate. So it stinks. Hopefully hopefully he'll be able to kind of rehab it and, heal before Texas Pro Day. But definitely one of those guys that kind of stuck out like, that's a crappy situation, but it is what it is.
I'm glad you brought his pro day up because I'm thinking, go ice up, son, and get ready for your pro day. Yeah. And then give us some great numbers and watch his stock go to the moon. So maybe that's a guy you just kind of put on the wait and see list if you're the Patriots. I want to ask you this. This is sort of a big picture question, like a zoom out. Mm-hmm. As you looked at this entire combine, I'm going to throw this to both of you guys. I mean, what was the strongest position group overall? Because people say this isn't a top-heavy draft where there's these generational stud players, but it is, as I've heard it described, quote, a meat and potatoes draft. Like you can fill out your roster here. There are a lot of good, talented players, depth pieces, things of this nature. Yeah. So as you sort of look at the positions, if you want to rank them or just tell me one that stood out to you, we'll start with you, Esmeezy. What was a position that stood out to you from this combine overall? Yeah,
I hope it's not recency bias, but I'm going to go with the offensive line today on Sunday. And, we just talked a lot about Ersery. And I think another one that stands out, the Georgia center, Jared Wilson, he tested fantastic. That's another guy you kind of have seen floated to the Patriots in some mock drafts. Certainly a guy that, probably not even a day 2 pick, maybe early day 3. But, center, definitely a position of need for the Patriots. So I think that he was another one that stood out. And just, we talked a lot about the Will Campbell thing, but his arm length wasn't ideal. But, he tested all the agility stuff, all the speed stuff. He tested really well when it came to that stuff. I believe he ran the fastest 40 of any lineman today. I know it was under 5 seconds. So I just think that there are a lot of, good offensive linemen when you get into those meat and potatoes rounds.
Yeah, I think for me, the position group jumped out the most was, if we're talking about meat and potatoes, as Elliot Wolf said, the meatier part of the draft are the receivers as the middle. But to see a guy like Jalen Noel finish first in bench press reps at 23 at his size. Like, he's not the biggest guy, but just show that strength, how well he performed in the shuttle, how well he performed in the 3-cone. Like, he was top 6 in both categories, led everyone in a vertical. And then also Dante Thornton out of Tennessee, 6'4", ran a 4.3 40. Like, insane. And then a big vertical too. His 10-yard split was insane. That's a guy that could be a 5th or 6th rounder, but that's going to have a really good wide receiver coach salivating to go out and get. Like Dante Thornton Jr., Miami Dolphins. For a guy like Mike McDaniels that always prioritizes speed and obviously has developed good wide receivers too, how do you not go out a guy like that where it's a 4.3 speed, it's Xavier Worthy's speed, but it's in the body of DK Metcalf. Like, not as thick, but to that point, I think wide receivers helped themselves out the most. Those are the guys that had to work out. They had to improve their stock. Mm-hmm. And there just isn't that clear-cut stud in all of this. Like, Emeka Egbuka is really good, but like that could be a 2nd, 3rd rounder in another draft. Luther Burden is the next Deebo Samuel, but could be a 2nd rounder like Deebo was.
Right.
Same thing with Ted McMillan of just a limited ceiling. I think the wide receivers overall themselves help the most. And the guys, I didn't want them to perform so well because I wanted them to fall to the Pats. But Jaden Higgins, that's going to be a 38th overall pick range for the Patriots. Jalen Noel could be in that range, or we could see them go very well. Like, put offensive line 1st round, and then it very well could go receiver. And then we could see them fill out depth from that point on. Right? But like it does, and again, we're going to get into it, is that the reports that have come out, Mike Vrabel doesn't care about who's been drafted when. Yeah. Jalen Polk, Layden Robinson, hello, wake up. They're going to draft guys at those positions and want to get their dude. So I think receivers help themselves out the most.
I like the defensive ends. I don't – Esmeezy, you would know this more than me. I don't know his first name. His last name's Stewart from Texas A&M.
Shamar. That's my guy.
God.
He's insane.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
I watched his workout. There was a couple of
You don't
defensive
listen to
linemen.
me, T. I've been saying Shamar Stewart.
Listen, I do block out a lot of this stuff that you guys talk about, but I watched his workout and I was like, that dude is the truth.
And
There
that's
were a
what
lot
he
of
is.
defensive linemen that jumped out to me. This feels, again, outside of Abdul Carter and maybe Mason Graham, of course, but it doesn't feel as top heavy like with these stars. But it just felt like watching that defensive line group, like a deep defensive line class, too.
Yeah.
That jumped out to me anyway.
James Pierce helped himself a lot, too. I mean,
Yeah.
6'5",
Oh, my
245,
God.
447.
Oh.
He is – the ceiling isn't as high. Like, again, it's Abdul Carter and everyone else. But James Pierce right away is very pro-ready. He's a day one starter. Shamar Stewart's a project. He has to put all these tools and exceptional traits together.
Right.
James Pierce is a refined piece that'll drop into your defense right away. And James Pierce, Green Bay Packers, maybe Eagles if they don't trade away that first for Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
That's a guy that fits in those scenarios. He's Sean McGuire of Nesson.com. Sean, thanks for stopping by, talking Combine, my guy.
It was good to be with you guys.
And we talked good about the Cowboys. Shout out Zach Martin, 16th overall pick, became a
That's,
legend.
when I get the chance to shed some light on something good that's happened for the last 10 years of the organization, George, I gotta make sure I do it.
And he wanted Johnny Football, George.
When I shook that
No, I
Zach
didn't.
Martin's hand and my hand disappeared, I said, my golly, have you ever tried to open up a mining shaft with these bare hands? Because you can do it, son, if you don't want to play football.
This is your fault, McGuire. This is all your fault.
And I say my hand was shaking tighter than a witch's yippee at that point of the day. I was like, I got to draft that boy. Don't ask me what a witch's yippee is because I don't know. But my grandma, my Meemaw, always told me about that.
Meemaw?
My Meemaw, rest in heavens, and led me to this day and age where I lead the Cowboys to the top of the. All right, I got to stop.
McGuire.
People are going to be like, "What's going on?" He's Sean McGuire. Sean, thanks for stopping by, my man.
All right, see you guys.
And make sure to stream the entire Sox season with Nesson 360 annual plan available at an all-new reduced price of just $20 a month paid annually. And for a limited time, get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit Nesson360.com to sign up today.